The Cherokee girl was sold to a cruel merchant for a single horse and a pouch of silver coins. But the Lakota warrior who witnessed the heartless transaction would soon discover that this resilient young woman possessed a spirit more powerful than the ancient winds themselves. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The summer heat shimmered across the trading post of Broken Ridge like an oppressive blanket, carrying with it the mingled sense of leather, tobacco, and human desperation. In the shadow of the towering Rocky Mountains, a small gathering of traders, travelers, and local settlers had assembled outside Thornton's general store. Most had come to barter goods or exchange news of the changing frontier. But on this particular day, they witnessed a transaction that would forever alter the course of many lives. William Standing Bear stood with shoulders slumped in defeat, his once proud Cherokee features now weathered by grief and hardship. The smallpox epidemic that had torn through his village had taken his wife, 2 sons, and most of their community. Leaving him alone with his 18-year-old daughter, Naya, the disease had been merciless, but even more cruel was the aftermath. Their tribal land seized by opportunistic settlers while they fought to survive. Their possessions claimed by thieves who preyed on the vulnerable. "She's strong despite her size," William muttered to Ezra Thornton, the trading post owner whose calculating eyes studied Naya with the detached interest of a man accustomed to appraising merchandise rather than human beings. "Can cook, clean. So better than most. Knows plants and healing ways too." Naya stood perfectly still beside her father, her eyes downcast but her spine straight as an arrow. She had learned long ago that quiet dignity was sometimes the only possession that couldn't be stolen. Her delicate features masked a strength that had survived disease, displacement, and now the ultimate betrayal by the very person who should have protected her. Thornton circled Naya slowly, his boots kicking up dust as he evaluated her like livestock. At 57, his face bore the deep creases of frontier hardship and the cold calculation of a man who had profited from others' misfortunes for decades. "What about her speaking? Does she know English?" Thornton demanded, his voice carrying the harsh edge of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Speaks it better than most schoolteachers," William replied, his voice hollow with shame. "Reads too. Her mother taught her before." His words trailed off, the memory of his wife still too painful to articulate. From across the dusty yard, another pair of eyes watched the exchange with growing unease. Dakota Thunder Horse, black. Elk sat atop his painted stallion, Spirit, the muscular Lakota warrior's imposing presence drawing nervous glances from several of the settlers. Standing 6'4" with shoulders broad as a buffalo's, Dakota's scarred face told the story of many battles, but his eyes held a wisdom that belied his fearsome reputation. Dakota had come to Broken Ridge on a diplomatic mission, carrying messages between his Lakota elders and the army fort 30 miles east. At 32, he had earned respect among both his people and, reluctantly, among some of the white military leaders who recognized his intelligence and integrity in a time when understanding between cultures was rare as gold. "1 horse and 10 silver dollars, Thornton announced, his tone suggesting generosity where none existed. "That's more than fair for these difficult times." William's hand trembled as he reached for the offered payment. "She needs a safe place," he said, his voice breaking. "The winters are coming, and I can't. She have a roof and meals," Thornton cut him off impatiently. "More than most can claim these days. Now is it a deal or not? I've got other business." "Waiting." As William nodded in miserable agreement, Naya's eyes finally lifted, scanning the gathered crowd not with fear, but with something more complex, a silent assessment of the world that had brought her to this moment. Her gaze briefly met Dakota's across the distance, and in that fleeting connection, something unspoken passed between them. "Wait," came a deep voice that silenced the murmuring crowd. Dakota guided his horse forward, the animal's hooves stirring. Dust that danced in the sunlight. This transaction dishonors everyone present. Thornton's face darkened with annoyance. This isn't your business, Indian. This is a fair agreement between willing parties. Dakota dismounted with fluid grace that belied his size, his movements controlled and deliberate. There is nothing fair when desperation forces a father to sell his daughter. His dark eyes studied William with a mixture of compassion and judgment. Your ancestors would weep to see this day. William flinched as if struck. You don't understand. The disease took everything. My wife, my sons, our home. Where can she go? What can I do? Your daughter is not a horse to be traded, Dakota said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. She is the future of your people. Naya watched this exchange without expression, though her hands had tightened slightly at her sides, the only outward sign of her internal struggle. She had known for weeks that her father was contemplating the solution, had seen the desperate calculations in his eyes as their situation grew more dire. Part of her understood his impossible position, even as another part would never forgive. This final abandonment. Thornton stepped forward, his hand moving subtly toward the pistol at his hip. This doesn't concern you. The agreement is made, is it? Dakota asked, his attention shifting to Naya herself. Has she agreed to be sold like a blanket or a bag of flour? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot. To us, now back to the story. For the first time since the negotiation began, someone had acknowledged Naya as a person with her own voice. The simple recognition sent a visible ripple through her carefully maintained composure. My father believes. This is necessary, she said quietly, her voice carrying unexpected strength and clarity. It was the first time she had spoken, and the musical quality of her words seemed to hang in the air like a remembered song. Dakota studied her with newfound interest. There was something in her careful response, not submission, but rather a measured assessment of limited options. He recognized the strategic patience of someone accustomed to navigating dangerous circumstances. And what do you believe? He asked. Before Naya could answer, William interrupted, his voice sharpening with desperate anger. Stop this. You make things worse. The decision is made. 3 horses, Dakota said suddenly, addressing Thornton directly. I'll give you 3 horses for the same price you're offering. A confused murmur ran through the onlookers. Thornton's eyes narrowed with suspicion. What's your interest in this girl? My interest is in justice, Dakota replied evenly. This woman deserves better than to be sold to a man whose treatment of his previous servants is well known among my people. This revelation sent a fresh wave of tension through the gathering. Several settlers looked away uncomfortably, confirming without words that Thornton's reputation was no mystery to them either. You insult me in my own trading post. Thornton's face flushed with anger. I speak truth in a place where it seems unwelcome, Dakota countered. He turned to William. Your daughter can come with me to our winter camp. She will be treated with respect, given shelter and protection until spring brings new possibilities. William looked torn between hope and suspicion. Why would Lakota help Cherokee? We are all the original people of this land, Dakota said simply. The divisions between our tribes matter less each season as the newcomers push us all toward the same fate. Naya's expression had transformed during this exchange, a subtle light awakening in her eyes that had been absent before. She studied Dakota with careful attention, assessing not just his words, but the way he stood, the respect with which he addressed her directly, and the controlled power that radiated from him without threat or domination. She stays here, Thornton declared firmly. The deal is struck. I'll double my offer, Dakota responded without hesitation. 6 horses for her freedom to choose her own path. The crowd's murmuring grew louder. 6 horses represented significant wealth, far more than Naya could possibly be worth as a servant or laborer. Something unspoken seemed to be happening beneath the surface of this negotiation. William looked stricken, caught between Thornton's growing anger and the unexpected alternative being offered. "Naya," he said finally, using her name for the first time during the entire transaction. "What do you wish?" The simple question, acknowledging her right to determine her own fate, seemed to straighten her spine even further. For a moment, the gathered crowd glimpsed something in her bearing that transcended her circumstances, a dignity and presence that suggested hidden depths. "I would know more of this offer," she said carefully, addressing Dakota directly. "What would be expected of me among your people?" Dakota's answer came without hesitation. "You would be a guest, not a servant, free to contribute according to your abilities and to leave when spring comes if you choose." Thornton's patience finally shattered. "Enough of this nonsense. The girl stays here. I need the help, and her father needs what I'm offering. Everyone else can mind their own business." As tension mounted, an unexpected interruption came from the edge of the gathering. An elderly woman with silver hair and the weathered face of a frontier survivor stepped forward, leaning heavily on a carved walking stick. "That girl has the gift," she announced in a voice that carried surprising strength. "I've seen it in her eyes. Same as my grandmother had." Silence fell over the crowd as they turned toward Martha Wilson, a respected healer known throughout the region for her uncanny abilities with herbs and her insights that some whispered went beyond natural knowledge. "What gift?" someone finally asked. Martha's eyes never left Naya's face, the old knowing, the way of seeing what others miss. "I watched her gather plants last spring when they camped near my cabin. She found healing herbs that haven't grown in that valley for 20 years, went straight to them like they were calling her name." This revelation sent a ripple of murmurs through the onlookers. In frontier communities where doctors were scarce and medicines expensive, those with genuine healing abilities were valued beyond measure. Thornton scoffed loudly. "Superstitious nonsense from an old woman. We're conducting business here." But Martha continued as if he hadn't spoken. 3 people in this settlement would have died last winter if not for the teas and poultices she prepared, including your own grandson, Ezra Thornton, though you never knew it was her remedy that broke his fever. Thornton's face registered, surprise before quickly hardening again. "All the more reason she's needed here. As a healer respected for her gifts, or as an unpaid servant in your storeroom?" Martha challenged, her voice carrying the moral authority of a community elder. Dakota watched this exchange with growing understanding. The pieces were falling into place. Naya's carefully controlled demeanor, the subtle awareness in her eyes, and now this confirmation of abilities that went beyond ordinary knowledge. Among his people, such gifts were recognized early and nurtured with reverence. "My final offer," Dakota announced, his voice cutting through the tension. 8 horses and my personal pledge of protection for the girl under Lakota honor. She will be treated as a person of value, not as property." The exorbitant offer silenced everyone, including Thornton. 8 horses represented wealth that few in the region could match. More importantly, Dakota's pledge of protection under Lakota honor was no small matter. Such promises were known to be unbreakable among his people. William looked at his daughter with new eyes, perhaps truly seeing her for the first time since tragedy had consumed their family. "Naya," he said softly, "I thought I was saving you the only way I could. I didn't know. Many fathers fail to see their daughters clearly," Martha said, her voice gentler now. "But it's not too late to make a better choice." Naya's calm voice carried across the now silent gathering. "I would go with the Lakota." Simple words that nevertheless held the weight of a life-changing decision. Thornton's face contorted with barely controlled rage. This is theft of a promised transaction. I won't stand for it. 8 horses far exceeds your offer, Dakota pointed out reasonably. And the choice has been made by the one whose life is at stake. For a tense moment, it seemed Thornton might reach for his weapon, but the presence of too many witnesses, including several who clearly sided with Naya, stayed his hand. Instead, he spat in the dust near William's feet. Take your payment and get out of my trading post. Neither of you will ever do business here again. As the crowd began to disperse, Dakota approached Naya with respectful distance. We should leave before the sun sets. Do you have possessions to gather? Very little, she admitted. Just a small bundle with my mother's belongings and some herbs I've collected. William stood awkwardly nearby, the payment for his daughter clutched forgotten in his hand. Naya, Words failed him as the full weight of what he had nearly done settled on his shoulders. I understand why you thought this was necessary, she said quietly, but I cannot go with you now. Perhaps someday, when wounds have healed. The dignity in her forgiveness, partial though it was, made William's shame all the more apparent. He nodded wordlessly, tears finally breaking through his stoic facade. Dakota helped Naya mount his painted stallion Spirit, her small bundle secured behind the saddle. As they prepared to depart, Martha approached and pressed something into Naya's hand, a small leather pouch that rattled with the sound of seeds. For your new beginning, the old woman said. Rare healing plants that will grow even in the shadow of mountains. Your gift will be honored among his people in ways it never could be here. As Dakota led the horse away from Broken Ridge, the watching crowd couldn't help but notice how the setting sun seemed to illuminate the pair, the imposing warrior walking with purpose beside his powerful mount, and the slender Cherokee woman, sitting tall in the saddle, her profile etched against the blazing sky like a figure from legend. Little did any of them realize that this unexpected meeting would set in motion events that would eventually become whispered stories around countless frontier fires, tales of extraordinary healing, of wisdom that bridged divided peoples, and of a partnership that would challenge everything the Western territories thought they understood about power, knowledge, and the true nature of strength. As they crested the first ridge outside town, Naya finally spoke the question that had been forming since Dakota's unexpected intervention. Why would you offer 8 valuable horses for a stranger? The truth, please. Dakota paused, turning to look up at her with unexpected honesty in his dark eyes. Because I recognize something in you that few others would see. Among my people, we believe that those with special gifts appear when they are most needed. And these are desperate times for all the original peoples of this land. What makes you think I have special gifts? She asked carefully. The way you listen, he replied simply. Not just with your ears, but with your entire being. I watched you during the negotiation. You were hearing things beyond the words being spoken. My grandmother had this same quality. She could hear the approaching rain a day before it arrived, could sense sickness in a child before the first cough appeared. Naya was silent for a long moment, considering whether to trust this stranger with the truth she had carefully guarded. Finally, she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. I hear the songs of plants. Each one sings differently about what healing it can offer, what purpose it serves in the great circle. My mother had this gift, and her mother before her. Instead of skepticism, Dakota's face showed deep understanding. Such abilities are respected among the Lakota. Our medicine people would recognize your gift as sacred. As they continued their journey into the gathering dusk, neither could have predicted how their chance meeting would alter not just their own lives, but the fate of communities throughout the Western territories. The Cherokee girl with the rare healing gift and the Lakota warrior who recognized her value were about to forge a connection that would transcend the boundaries of their separate nations and challenge the very foundations of a rapidly changing world. Back in Broken Ridge, William Standing Bear watched his daughter disappear into the distance, the weight of his decision settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. He had nearly sold his greatest treasure for a pittance, blinded by grief and desperation to the extraordinary spirit that had been entrusted to his care. As darkness fell, he turned away from the trading post and began walking east toward the rising moon, carrying with him a new purpose born from the deepest regret. At the same moment, Martha Wilson returned to her small cabin on the outskirts of the settlement, her weathered hands carefully arranging dried herbs for the winter ahead. "Safe journey, young one," she whispered to the night air. "The world has need of your gifts in the dark days to come." And so began a story that would eventually be told in whispers around countless frontier fires, the tale of a Cherokee healer whose gifts would bridge worlds, and the Lakota warrior whose recognition of her true value would alter the course of many lives. Their journey was just beginning, but already the patterns of destiny were weaving around them like an invisible web, connecting past and future in ways neither could yet imagine. As night fell across the vast landscape, Dakota and Naya made camp beside a small stream, the first stars appearing in the darkening sky above them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new discoveries, and the first steps toward a shared destiny that would eventually become legend throughout the Western territories. But for now, they rested in the simple knowledge that sometimes, in the most unexpected moments, life's path can change direction as swiftly and completely as an autumn wind, changing course across the endless prairie. The first light of dawn painted the distant mountains with hues of amber and gold as Naya awakened beside the small campfire. She had slept surprisingly well despite the uncertainty of her situation, perhaps because for the first time in months, she had made a choice rather than simply enduring circumstances forced upon her. Across the glowing embers, Dakota was already awake, his imposing figure silhouetted against the brightening sky as he tended to the horses. There was a fluid economy to his movements that spoke of a lifetime spent in harmony with the natural world. Despite his intimidating size and the battle scars that marked his face and arms, Naya had felt no fear in his presence, only a curious sense of recognition, as if they had walked parallel paths despite their different tribal origins. "We have 4 days of travel to reach the winter camp," Dakota said when he noticed her stirring. "The path grows steeper and more difficult with each day. Are you comfortable riding Spirit alone? I can walk alongside for today, but tomorrow we will need to move faster." Naya rose gracefully, brushing dust from her simple buckskin dress. "I have ridden since childhood, though not recently." Her voice carried quiet confidence. "Your horse and I will understand each other." As if in confirmation, the painted stallion nickered softly and stepped toward her, his ears forward with interest rather than the wariness horses often showed to strangers. Naya extended her hand, palm up, and waited as the magnificent animal breathed in her scent. "He accepts you already," Dakota observed with subtle surprise. "Spirit is not usually so trusting with those he doesn't know." Naya's lips curved in a small smile. Animals recognize truth more quickly than people. They sense intentions without needing words to confuse matters. Dakota nodded thoughtfully as he packed their few belongings. "My grandmother used to say that animals remember the old agreements between their kind and ours, promises made when the world was young and all creatures spoke the same language." "My mother spoke of similar beliefs," Naya replied, carefully folding the blanket she had slept upon. "She said that healing comes from remembering those ancient connections, not from the plants themselves, but from their willingness to share their power with those who approach with respect." This exchange, simple though it was, established a foundation of shared understanding between them, recognition that despite coming from different nations, with different languages and customs, they carried similar wisdom passed through generations of their peoples. As they traveled through the morning hours, the landscape began to change dramatically. The rolling plains gave way to increasingly rugged terrain, with pine forests climbing the slopes of foothills that eventually rose toward the distant mountains. The September air carried the first hints of autumn's approach, crisp and sweet with the scent of sun-warmed pine needles and sage. Naya rode with natural grace, her small frame balanced perfectly atop Spirit, as if she had been born to the saddle. Dakota led them along paths that seemed invisible until they were directly upon them, ancient trails known only to those who carried the memories of countless generations who had traversed these lands. Your people are far from their traditional territories, Naya observed as they stopped to rest beside a clear stream at midday. The Cherokee know of the Lakota as people of the northern plains, not these mountains. Dakota's expression grew solemn. Much has changed in recent seasons. The white soldiers push from all directions now, forcing many tribes to adapt or perish. Our band follows the old ways as much as possible, but we have had to learn new patterns of movement, new territories, new alliances. And yet you risk bringing a Cherokee stranger into your winter camp, she noted, studying him with quiet intensity. That seems unusual for these dangerous times. These dangerous times are precisely why old divisions between our peoples must be set aside. Dakota replied, his deep voice carrying the weight of conviction. The newcomers see us all as one people to be removed from their path. Perhaps they have taught us an unintended lesson, that we truly are connected in our struggle to survive. As they continued their journey through the afternoon, Naya began to notice subtle signs of Dakota's vigilance, the way he studied distant ridgelines, how he occasionally stopped to listen to sounds that seemed imperceptible, his careful attention to tracks they crossed along their path. Without explicitly stating it, she understood they were traveling through contested territory, where danger might come from multiple directions. "You fear we are being followed," she said at last, not as a question but as a simple observation. Dakota glanced at her with newfound respect for her perceptiveness. "Not followed yet, but word travels quickly in these mountains. Thornton has connections among unscrupulous traders and some of the military outposts. 8 horses is a significant loss. He may decide your acquisition is worth pursuing." "You believe he would come after me?" Naya asked, surprised by the suggestion. "Not for you alone, perhaps, but for the horses, his wounded pride, and the rumors of your healing abilities. Yes, such a combination might motivate a man like Thornton to action." They made camp that evening in a protected hollow that offered both concealment and clear views of the surrounding terrain. As darkness settled around them, Dakota built a small fire designed to produce minimal smoke, arranging rocks to reflect heat toward their sleeping area while containing the light within their small enclosure. After a simple meal of dried meat and gathered berries, they sat in comfortable silence, watching the flames dance in the gentle evening breeze. It was Naya who finally broke the quiet, her soft voice barely rising above the crackling fire. "Tell me about your grandmother, the one who shared your gift of listening." The unexpected personal question seemed to catch Dakota by surprise. His normally stoic expression softened slightly as memories surfaced. She was called Evening Star, though her true name was spoken only in sacred ceremonies. She was not a chief or warrior as the white people might expect power to look, but her wisdom guided our people through 4 decades of increasing turmoil. "How did she teach you to listen?" Naya pressed gently. Dakota's gaze remained fixed on the flames, but his thoughts clearly traveled to distant days. "Not by instruction as white schools teach. She would simply take me into the forests and prairies from the time I could walk. We would sit in silence for hours, sometimes an entire day, until I began to hear beyond the obvious sounds, beyond wind and leaves or birds calling, to the deeper rhythms beneath." "And what did you hear in those deeper rhythms?" Naya's question carried genuine curiosity rather than challenge. "At first, nothing but my own impatience," Dakota admitted with a rare smile that transformed his stern features. "I was a boy who wanted to run with other boys, to play at hunting and war. Sitting in silence seemed a punishment. But that changed Naya observed. Yes, after many seasons of this practice during my 12th summer, something shifted. We were sitting beside a small spring in the Black Hills' sacred land to our people. As the sun reached its highest point, I suddenly could hear the water speaking, not just with its movement, but with its memory of the long journey from sky to mountain to ground. I could hear the ancient songs in the rocks that had witnessed the birth of mountains. Most clearly, I could hear my grandmother's joy that I had finally begun to understand. The vulnerability in this sharing created a new dimension to their connection. Naya recognized the gift he had offered in revealing this formative experience, a warrior admitting to childhood impatience, a leader acknowledging the gradual nature of his learning. Your grandmother's teachings serve your people well, she said softly. You listen not just with your ears, but with your spirit. It is a rare quality in these times of so much noise and haste. They fell back into comfortable silence until Dakota spoke again, his question direct but respectful. And your gift with plants, how did it come to you? Naya gazed into the fire, organizing memories that were both precious and painful. Unlike your patient learning, mine came suddenly and at great cost. When the sickness swept through our village, my mother was among the first to fall ill. As our healer, she had exposed herself to help others. Her voice remained steady, though her eyes reflected deep grief. On the third night of her fever, when her strength was failing, she called me to her side. She pressed her palm against my heart and spoke words in our oldest language, words I recognized from healing ceremonies, but had never been taught directly. Dakota listened with absolute attention, recognizing the sacred nature of what she was sharing. That night, as she slipped away from this world, something passed from her to me, Naya continued. When dawn came, I walked into the forest in my grief, and suddenly the plants were speaking, not in words as we use them, but in sensations, in purposes, in possibilities. Each one sang its own song of healing, of use, of connection to the greater whole. A dying gift, Dakota said softly. Our elders speak of such transmissions, knowledge passed at the threshold between worlds. Naya nodded. I gathered what the plants told me was needed and returned to help those still suffering, including my father and brothers. I worked for days without rest, preparing remedies I had never been taught to make, yet somehow knew with absolute certainty. Her voice faltered slightly. I saved many in our village, but not my brothers. They had gone too far along the path to the spirit world before I understood what I had been given. The profound loss beneath her composed exterior touched something deep within Dakota. He recognized the familiar shape of grief that had been transformed into purpose, a pattern his own life had followed after losing family to warfare and disease. Such gifts come with great responsibility, he said, not as platitude but as acknowledgement of the weight she carried. And isolation, Naya added quietly. Those I helped were grateful, but also afraid. They whispered that the spirits had touched me, that I walked in two worlds at once. Even my father could not look at me the same way after. Until he saw you as something to trade rather than someone to protect, Dakota observed, a rare edge entering his voice. Grief changes people in ways we cannot predict, Naya replied without bitterness. He lost his wife and sons, then his home and position. Perhaps selling me seemed the only way to give me shelter while freeing himself from a daily reminder of all he had lost. Her compassion for the father who had been willing to sell her revealed a depth of wisdom beyond her 18 years. Dakota recognized that her understanding did not eliminate the pain of betrayal, but rather placed it within a larger context of human frailty and desperate circumstances. As the fire burned down to glowing embers, Dakota rose to check the perimeter of their camp one final time before sleep. When he returned, he found Naya kneeling beside his bedroll, her fingers gently tracing the long scar that ran along his forearm, visible now that he had removed his protective leather bracers. This wound never healed properly, she said, not questioning but stating what she somehow knew. It pains you when storms approach. Lakota made no move to withdraw his arm from her examination. A Crow warrior's axe 3 summers ago. Our healer did what he could, but the damage went deep. Without asking permission, Naya reached into the small pouch at her waist and removed a folded leaf containing a greenish paste. The pungent scent of crushed herbs filled the air between them as she carefully applied the mixture along the ragged scar. I gathered these plants at our midday rest, she explained. They called to me from beside the stream, showing me they would be needed. The mixture created an immediate sensation of warmth that penetrated deep into Lakota's arm, reaching places where a persistent ache had become so familiar he had almost forgotten life without it. His surprise must have shown on his face, for Naya smiled slightly as she bound the poultice with a strip of clean cloth. By morning, the deep pain will be gone, she said with quiet certainty. The scar remains, but the memory in your muscles and bones will release. Thank you, Lakota said simply, recognizing that elaboration would diminish the significance of what had just transpired between them. In this small healing exchange, a covenant of trust had been established that went beyond words or explanations. As they settled into their respective bedrolls on opposite sides of the dying fire, Lakota found himself reflecting on the strange turns of fate that had brought this extraordinary young woman into his path. When he had ridden into Broken Ridge that morning, he could never have anticipated that by nightfall he would be responsible for a Cherokee healer, whose gifts might prove crucial to his people's survival in the challenging winter ahead. Just before sleep claimed him, he heard Naya's voice drift softly through the darkness. The plants tell me we are not alone in these mountains. Tomorrow we must be more cautious. With that cryptic warning, silence returned to their small camp, broken only by the occasional call of night birds and the distant howl of a solitary wolf greeting the rising moon. Dawn broke with a shroud of mist clinging to the mountainsides, reducing visibility and muffling sounds in a way that made Lakota increasingly uneasy. They broke camp quickly, consuming a cold breakfast to avoid making a fire that might be spotted through the fog. We should reach the high pass by midday if we maintain a good pace, Lakota explained as he helped Naya mount Spirit. Once across, we'll be in territory my people patrol regularly. Until then, we remain vulnerable. Naya nodded her understanding, gathering the reins with confident hands. The plants are still warning of others nearby. Not directly behind us, but moving parallel to our path. Lakota's expression remained impassive, but his eyes scanned the surrounding fog-shrouded forest with new intensity. How many? I cannot tell exactly. The warnings come through disturbances in the natural patterns, frightened birds, disturbed earth, broken stems. But the disruption suggests several people on horseback, moving with purpose. This confirmation of his own suspicions solidified Lakota's decision. We will not take the main pass. There's another way steeper and more dangerous, but known to few outside my tribe. They rode in tense silence as the terrain grew increasingly challenging. The trail narrowed until it was barely visible, clinging to mountainsides where a misstep could mean a deadly fall. Spirit moved with extraordinary care, seeming to understand the precarious nature of their journey. By mid-morning, they had ascended, well above the fog into bright sunshine that did little to warm the increasingly cold mountain air. Lakota called a brief halt in a protected cleft between towering rock formations, allowing both horse and riders a short rest. Beyond the next ridge lies the secret pass, he explained, pointing toward a seemingly impenetrable wall of stone. Ahead, from below or above, it appears to be solid mountain, but a narrow corridor cuts through created long ago when the earth itself moved in the time of our ancient stories. Naya studied the distant ridge with careful attention. And if someone knows of this passage and awaits us there, then we would be trapped, Lakota acknowledged grimly. But few alive know of its existence. My people guard such knowledge carefully. As they prepared to continue their journey, A sudden gust of wind brought a new scent to Naya's sensitive awareness, wood smoke, carried from somewhere below and behind them. Her body tensed, immediately drawing Dakota's attention. "They've stopped." "To make camp," she said quietly. The wind shifted for just a moment, but it was enough to carry the smell of their fire. Dakota nodded, his expression hardening. "They believe they are tracking us, but cannot see our exact path through the fog. They wait for better conditions before continuing, which gives us time to reach your secret pass," Naya concluded. "Yes, but we must move quickly. The weather in these mountains changes with little warning, especially as autumn approaches. The fog that conceals us now could lift in moments." They set off at a faster pace, Dakota now mounting behind Naya. On Spirit's broad back to speed their progress. The stallion carried the double burden without complaint, his powerful muscles working steadily as they navigated the treacherous mountain trail. The sun had reached its zenith when they finally approached the hidden passage. From a distance, the mountainside indeed appeared solid and impassable. Only as they drew within 100 yards did a narrow shadow become visible, a vertical slash in the ancient stone barely wide enough for a horse and rider to pass through single file. Just as they prepared to enter the secret corridor, a sound echoed across the mountainside, the distant crack of a rifle shot followed by several more in quick succession. "They've spotted us," Dakota said tersely, urgency replacing caution as he guided Spirit toward the narrow opening. As they entered the shadowed passage, the temperature dropped dramatically. Sheer walls of stone rose hundreds of feet on either side, reducing the sky to a thin blue ribbon far above. The passage twisted and turned, following what must have been an ancient fault line in the mountain structure. The confined space amplified every sound Spirit's hooves on stone, their own breathing, and most worryingly, the occasional distant shout that suggested their pursuers had discovered the entrance to the passage as well. "How long before we reach the other side?" Naya asked, her voice steady despite the growing danger. "The passage runs for nearly a mile through the mountain's heart," Dakota replied. "In places it widens enough for several horses abreast, in others it narrows until we must dismount and lead Spirit through." They had traveled perhaps halfway through the twisting corridor when disaster struck. A section of the path had collapsed in some recent rockfall, leaving a gap of several feet that dropped away into darkness below. Spirit halted abruptly, snorting his alarm at the unexpected obstacle. Dakota dismounted quickly, helping Naya down before examining the gap with critical eyes. "Spirit can jump this," he determined after careful assessment, "but it will be a difficult landing on the other side." "And if he falls?" Naya asked, peering into the dark chasm that seemed to have no bottom. "Then we continue on foot," Dakota sighed grimly. "But that would mean certain confrontation with those who follow. On horseback, we still have advantage of speed once beyond the passage." The sound of pursuit grew louder behind them, echoing confusingly in the twisting passage. Decisions had to be made quickly now, with little margin for error. "I'll go first with Spirit," Dakota decided. "Once across, you'll follow on your own. The gap is wide, but not impossible for a person to leap." Naya nodded her agreement, stepping back to give Dakota room to maneuver the nervous horse. With soft words in the Lakota language, Dakota calmed Spirit, guiding him several paces back from the edge to allow proper approach distance. With a sudden command and slight pressure from his knees, Dakota urged the stallion forward. Spirit gathered himself and launched across the gap with powerful grace, landing safely but awkwardly on the far side. Something in Dakota's expression and the watchful positioning of the Lakota warriors suggested this was merely the opening chapter in a longer conflict, one that would test not just her healing abilities, but the very foundations of trust between peoples with different histories, languages, and ways of understanding the world. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, casting long shadows across the valley floor, spirit carried them into the heart of the Lakota winter camp. Smoke rose from dozens of lodge fires, and curious faces turned to watch their arrival. The imposing warrior and the small Cherokee woman whose presence would soon transform their community in ways none could yet imagine. The story that had begun with a shameful transaction at a frontier trading post was evolving into something far more significant, a journey that would eventually be told around countless fires as an example of how recognition of true value could sometimes arrive in the most unexpected forms, from the most unexpected sources, at exactly the moment when it was most desperately needed. The Lakota winter camp sprawled across the protected valley like a living entity, its patterns of lodges, corrals, and communal spaces revealing generations of accumulated wisdom about survival in the harsh mountain winters. As Dakota led Naya through the central pathways, curious eyes followed their progress, children pausing in their play, women looking up from their work, warriors assessing the Cherokee stranger with measured caution. Our people have become wary of outsiders, Dakota explained quietly as they dismounted near a large central lodge decorated with elaborate paintings of buffalo and thunderbirds. Too many who appeared as friends brought disease, betrayal, or death in recent years. Naya understood this wariness all too well. Her own people had learned similar bitter lessons about trust and its consequences. I come with respect for your ways and gratitude for your protection, she replied. I seek only to contribute what skills I have while I shelter among you. Before Dakota could respond, the painted hide covering of the central lodge was drawn aside, revealing an elderly woman whose presence immediately commanded attention throughout the camp. Despite her advanced years and the walking stick she leaned upon, White Buffalo Woman carried herself with the unmistakable dignity of one whose authority came from wisdom rather than force. Her face was a map of experience, deep lines radiating from eyes that had witnessed nearly 8 decades of triumph and tragedy, joy and sorrow, birth and death. Her silver hair hung in 2 thick braids adorned with sacred symbols worked in colored beads and porcupine quills. Most striking were her eyes, clear and sharp as a hawk's, missing nothing as they took in every detail of the newcomer before her. Without waiting for introduction, White Buffalo Woman approached Naya directly, her gaze unwavering as she studied the young Cherokee woman's face. After a long silent assessment that seemed to reach beyond physical appearance into something deeper, she spoke a single sentence in the Lakota language. She says the plants have told her of your coming, Dakota translated, surprise evident in his voice. She has prepared a place for you in her lodge for many days now. Naya felt a profound sense of recognition wash over her. This woman's energy resonated with a familiar pattern, the same deep connection to the natural world that Naya's mother and grandmother had embodied. Without conscious thought, she responded in the traditional Cherokee greeting, for one healer acknowledging another. Though White Buffalo Woman could not have understood the Cherokee words, she nodded in clear recognition of their intent. Reaching forward with hands gnarled by age but still strong, she grasped Naya's forearms in the traditional greeting of her people. I am called White Buffalo Woman in your tongue, she said in halting but understandable English, surprising both Naya and Dakota. The plants speak to me also, though my hearing grows less clear with passing seasons. They have sung of your coming since the first leaves began to turn. This unexpected communication in a shared language created an immediate bond between the women, a bridge across the differences of their nations and generations. The gathered onlookers, sensing the significance of this meeting, maintained a respectful silence. I am Naya of the Cherokee, she responded simply. The plants guided me here, though I did not understand their purpose until this moment. White Buffalo Woman's weathered face creased into a smile that transformed her severe features. Purpose reveals itself like a hidden path, visible only when one has traveled far enough to see where previous steps were leading. She turned to include Dakota in their circle. You have brought us a great gift, Thunderhorse. The council will wish to hear how this came to be. The formality of the welcome now complete, practical matters took precedence. White Buffalo Woman lead Naya toward her lodge while Dakota departed with Gray Wolf to report to the tribal council about the pursuers they had encountered. Rest first, the elder healer instructed as they entered the spacious lodge. Then we will speak of many things before the evening meal. The interior of White Buffalo Woman's dwelling reflected her lifetime of healing work. Bundles of dried plants hung from the support poles, organized in patterns that Naya recognized as representing different bodily systems and spiritual purposes. Stone bowls of various sizes contained powders, seeds, and mixtures in various stages of preparation. Most impressive was a central pit where glowing coals maintained precise temperatures for specific medicinal preparations. A small sleeping area had indeed been prepared, just as White Buffalo Woman had claimed fresh hides laid over fragrant pine boughs, with a beautifully tanned buffalo robe folded nearby for warmth. You knew with such certainty that I would come, Naya observed, touching the carefully prepared bed with wonder. The future reveals itself to those who have learned to listen beyond their own thoughts, White Buffalo Woman replied. When we quiet our fears and expectations, truth can speak more clearly. This wisdom resonated deeply with Naya, who had often experienced similar insights when working with plants. My mother taught that healing begins with listening, not just to what people say about their pain, but to what their bodies whisper beneath their words. White Buffalo Woman nodded approvingly. Your mother taught you well. Now rest. Your journey has demanded much from your body, even as your spirit remains strong. Despite her intention to remain awake and learn more about her new surroundings, Naya found herself surrendering to bone-deep weariness. The events of recent days, from her father's attempt to sell her to the dramatic escape through the mountain passage, had drawn deeply from her reserves of strength. As she drifted towards sleep, wrapped in the buffalo robe's warmth, her last conscious awareness was of White Buffalo Woman singing softly, a healing melody so ancient it seemed to rise from the earth itself. Naya awakened to the muted sounds of evening activity throughout the camp, children being called to meals, horses being settled for the night, the low murmur of conversations around cookfires. The quality of light filtering through the lodge covering suggested several hours had passed. White Buffalo Woman sat nearby, her gnarled fingers deftly sorting tiny seeds into separate containers. She looked up as Naya stirred, setting aside her work. The council meets after the evening meal, she said without preamble. They will have many questions about your presence here. It would be wise to prepare yourself. Naya sat up, pushing aside the buffalo robe. Will they allow me to stay? That decision belongs to the Winter Chief and the council, White Buffalo Woman replied honestly. But Dakota's voice carries great weight, as does mine. More importantly, events beyond our control may make your presence not just accepted, necessary. Before Naya could ask what she meant by this cryptic statement, the elder healer rose and retrieved a small clay bowl containing a fragrant stew of roots, wild onions, and dried buffalo meat. Eat. Strength of body supports strength of spirit when facing challenges. As Naya ate the nourishing meal, White Buffalo Woman spoke of the Lakota winter camp, explaining how the 47 lodges represented families from 3 different bands who had chosen to winter together for mutual protection and support. The location had been carefully selected for its natural defenses, abundant water, sheltered grazing for horses, and proximity to both hunting grounds and medicinal plants. Our people have wintered in this valley for 7 generations, she explained. But only in recent years have we stayed beyond the first snow. The changing times force new patterns upon us all. Naya recognized the deeper truth beneath these simple words. Like her Cherokee people, the Lakota were adapting to a world transformed by the relentless expansion of white settlements and military presence. My own people have been forced to change much, Naya acknowledged. Those who remain in our eastern homelands face constant pressure to abandon our ways, while those who fled west encounter new challenges in unfamiliar territories. White Buffalo Woman nodded gravely. The great migration of the Pale Ones sweeps across the land like flood. Waters unstoppable, transforming everything in its path. She paused, her hawk-like eyes fixed on Naya with sudden intensity. But floods eventually recede, and what remains afterward depends on what was strong enough to endure. This perspective viewing the current devastation of native peoples as a terrible but potentially temporary phenomenon offered a framework of hope that Naya had not considered. Most Cherokee, including her father, spoke of their situation as an ending rather than a difficult passage toward some new beginning. Their conversation was interrupted by Dakota's arrival. He had changed from his travel-worn clothing into garments befitting his status, a finely tanned buckskin shirt adorned with porcupine quill work, leggings with intricate beaded patterns, and a single eagle feather secured in his hair. "The council is gathering," he announced. "They wish to hear from both of you." White Buffalo Woman rose with the deliberate movements of one who had learned to conserve energy. "Then we shall speak truth and let wisdom guide their judgment." The council lodge stood at the camp's center, larger than family dwellings and marked by painted symbols representing the 7 bands of the Lakota Nation. As they approached, Naya observed 13 men of varying ages already seated in a circle inside, with Gray Wolf occupying the position that signified leadership. Whispers and gestures from onlookers confirmed that this gathering had drawn unusual attention. The presence of a Cherokee woman in their winter camp represented something unprecedented, potential shift in how the Lakota might interact with other native nations during these chaotic times. Dakota guided Naya to a position of respect within the circle, with White Buffalo Woman joining them. The traditional protocols were observed, a pipe was lit and passed. Prayers were offered to the 4 directions, and formal acknowledgments made of each council member's presence. When these rituals concluded, Gray Wolf addressed Dakota directly in the Lakota language. Though Naya could not understand the words, the serious tone and measured cadence suggested he was being asked to explain how and why he had brought her to their camp. Dakota's response was equally formal, but delivered with the confidence of a warrior who stood behind his decisions. He spoke for several minutes, occasionally gesturing toward Naya or the mountains they had traversed. The council members listened, with impassive faces, giving no indication of their thoughts. When Dakota finished, Gray Wolf turned to White Buffalo Woman, addressing her with evident respect. Her response was brief but appeared to carry significant weight, as several council members nodded thoughtfully. Finally, Gray Wolf spoke directly to Naya, with Dakota translating his words. "Our chief asks what you seek among the Lakota people, and what you offer in return for winter shelter." Naya rose to her feet, understanding that this moment would determine not just her immediate future, but potentially the relationship between her people and the Lakota in times to come. She spoke with the formal dignity her mother had taught her. "For important occasions, I seek nothing beyond shelter until spring brings new possibilities," she began. "In return, I offer the healing knowledge passed through my mother's line, gifts of the plant nations that speak to me as they speak to your respected healer." She gestured respectfully toward White Buffalo Woman. "I come not as Cherokee to Lakota, but as one who listens to the plants, to those who value such wisdom." As Dakota translated her words, Naya noticed several council members exchange glances of interest. One elder leaned forward, asking a question that Dakota then relayed to her. "Walking Bear asks if your plant knowledge includes remedies for the cows coughing sickness that took 3 children last winter." Naya considered carefully before answering. "Among my people, we use 3 plants together for such illness, one for the fever, one for the cough itself, and one to strengthen the body's own healing power. I would need to learn which of these plants grow in your territories, or which Local plants sing with similar healing songs. This practical response seemed to satisfy Walking Bear, who nodded and sat back. Another council member younger than most, with a fresh scar running along his jawline, spoke next. Black Fox asks if you know of plants that draw poison from wounded flesh. Dakota translated. Many of our warriors now face not just arrows, but the metal bullets that often fester beneath the skin. Yes, Naya replied with greater confidence. My mother taught me 5 different poultices for drawing embedded objects and preventing the poisoning of blood. These skills I would gladly share. The questioning continued for nearly an hour, each council member inquiring about specific ailments, injuries, or preventative medicines that concerned them. Naya answered honestly, acknowledging when her knowledge had limitations while demonstrating the depth of her healing abilities. Throughout this exchange, White Buffalo Woman remained silent but watchful, her expression revealing approval as Naya navigated the complex cultural dynamics with both humility and quiet confidence. Finally, Gray Wolf raised his hand, bringing the questioning to an end. He spoke at length, his weathered face solemn as he delivered what was clearly a formal decision. When he finished, the council members tapped the ground before them in unified agreement. Our winter chief says you may remain until the spring thaw, Dakota translated. You will work alongside White Buffalo Woman, sharing knowledge between our peoples for mutual benefit. In exchange, you receive full protection as if you were Lakota born. Relief washed through Naya, though she maintained the composed exterior expected in such formal settings. I accept this generous offer with gratitude and pledge to honor your people's ways while I dwell among you. As the council dispersed, an unexpected moment occurred that would later be recognized as profoundly significant. Walking Bear, the elder who had first questioned her about the coughing sickness, approached Naya directly. Without waiting for translation, he pulled aside his shirt to reveal an angry wound on his shoulder, clearly from a bullet that had been removed but left festering damage behind. The directness of this request, coming before she had even been formally integrated into the camp's daily life, demonstrated both urgent need and a remarkable level of trust. Without hesitation, Naya examined the wound, her fingers gently probing the hot, swollen flesh around the entry point. I need certain plants, she said to Dakota. Can they be gathered before darkness falls completely? White Buffalo Woman stepped forward, speaking rapidly in Lakota. Dakota nodded. She says she has what you need in her lodge gathered this morning, as if she knew they would be required. This confirmation of White Buffalo Woman's foresight sent a ripple of murmurs through the onlookers who had lingered after the council meeting. The elder healer's reputation for prophetic dreams and visions was clearly well established among her people. As they returned to White Buffalo Woman's lodge, with Walking Bear following behind, Naya felt a strange sense of rightness, as if countless seemingly random events had been deliberately aligned to bring her to precisely where she needed to be, precisely when her skills were most needed. Inside the lodge, White Buffalo Woman gestured towards several bundles of fresh plants laid out as if in preparation. Among them, Naya immediately recognized the 3 she would have selected herself for treating infected wounds. You truly did know, she murmured, meeting the elder healer's knowing gaze. The plants told me which of their relatives to gather, White Buffalo Woman replied simply. They prepare for what is coming as much as we do. Together, the 2 healers worked in synchronized harmony that belied their brief acquaintance. Naya prepared a cleansing wash from one bundle of leaves, while White Buffalo Woman ground roots from another into a poultice. No instructions needed to be exchanged. Each recognized the other's purpose and moved accordingly. Walking Bear watched with stoic patience as they cleaned his wound thoroughly, applied the medicinal poultice, and bound it with strips of clean cloth. The entire procedure was conducted with ceremonial respect prayers offered at each stage, gratitude expressed to the plants that offered their healing power. Return tomorrow at midday, White Buffalo Woman instructed him in Lakota, with Dakota translating for Naya's benefit. The drawing of poison has begun, but complete healing requires time and multiple treatments. After Walking Bear departed, White Buffalo Woman turned to Naya with approval evident in her expression. You work with both skill and heart. Some healers have knowledge but lack the spirit connection that makes plants offer their strongest medicine. My mother taught that plants give their power most generously to those who approach with respect rather than entitlement. Naya replied, Each has its own spirit that must be acknowledged before its medicine can work fully. White Buffalo Woman nodded, clearly pleased with this philosophy that matched her own. Tomorrow we will walk the valley together. You must learn which healing allies grow in these mountains before snow covers the ground. Dakota, who had remained quietly observant during the healing work, now spoke. The council was impressed by your knowledge and your manner of sharing. Walking Bear's willingness to seek your help immediately will influence others who might have been hesitant. The wounds speak their own truth, Naya replied. Pain recognizes no tribal boundaries or ancient conflicts. It simply seeks relief, wherever it might be found. This simple observation carried profound implications in a world where tribal divisions had often been exacerbated by the pressures of white expansion. The possibility that shared needs might transcend historical differences offered a vision of cooperation that few had considered. As evening deepened into night, the camp settled into familiar rhythms, families gathering in their lodges, sentries taking positions on the valley's perimeter, the sounds of soft singing and storytelling drifting through the crisp autumn air. Dakota departed to attend to his responsibilities, leaving Naya and White Buffalo Woman to continue organizing medicinal supplies and exchanging knowledge about their respective healing traditions. Your journey here was difficult, the elder healer observed as they worked. To be sold by your father, then pursued as property, such experiences leave wounds that plants alone cannot heal. The gentle acknowledgement of her emotional pain, offered without pity or judgment, opened something in Naya that she had kept carefully contained since leaving Broken Ridge. I understand why he did it, she said quietly. After losing my mother and brothers, something broke inside him. The father I knew as a child would never have considered such an action. White Buffalo Woman nodded sagely. Grief changes the pathways of the mind as surely as rivers change course after great storms. What once seemed impossible becomes the only path visible through the darkness. Yet understanding doesn't ease the pain of betrayal, Naya admitted, giving voice to feelings she had suppressed for practicality's sake. Nor should it, the elder replied with surprising firmness. Pain carries its own wisdom when we neither deny it nor allow it to consume us. It teaches boundaries, strengthens resolve, and clarifies what truly matters in this brief journey through the living world. This perspective, treating emotional pain as a teacher rather than an enemy to be vanquished, offered Naya a framework for processing her experiences that honored their significance without allowing them to define her future. As they continued working side by side, White Buffalo Woman shared stories of her own journey as a healer, including painful lessons, moments of miraculous insight, and the weighty responsibility of holding her people's well-being in her hands through decades of increasing hardship. The greatest challenge for any healer, she explained as she carefully labeled a container of precious seeds, is remembering that we are merely channels for power that flows through us, but does not originate within us. Pride creates blockages that prevent the purest healing from manifesting. This teaching resonated deeply with Naya's own experiences. Since receiving her mother's gift, she had sometimes felt overwhelmed by others' expectations and her own sense of responsibility. The reminder that she was a conduit rather than the source of healing power lightened this burden significantly. Their conversation continued late into the night, creating a foundation of mutual respect and understanding that would support their work together in the months ahead. More than knowledge of plants was being exchanged, wisdom about life itself passed between generations, and across tribal boundaries that had once seemed impermeable. When Naya finally settled onto her sleeping robes, physical exhaustion was balanced by spiritual fulfillment. The journey that had begun with her father's desperate attempt to sell her had led, through unpredictable turns, to perhaps the most valuable apprenticeship a young healer could hope for. As sleep claimed her, her last thoughts were of gratitude, not just for her present safety, but for the strange and painful path that had delivered her to this place of unexpected purpose. Dawn arrived with a crystalline clarity that transformed the valley into a landscape of breathtaking beauty. Frost coated the grasses in delicate patterns that caught the first sunlight, creating a shimmering effect across the open areas between lodges. The surrounding mountains stood like ancient guardians, their peaks already dusted with early snow that hinted at the coming winter. White Buffalo Woman was already awake, tending the lodge fire with practiced efficiency. "We begin your learning today," she announced as Naya stirred. "After morning meal, we walk the valley's perimeter so you may greet the plant nations that will be your allies here." This phrasing treating the expedition as an introduction between equals, rather than a teacher simply identifying resources, reflected the deep respect for plant consciousness that both women shared. After a simple breakfast of dried berries and corn porridge, they set out with gathering baskets and digging tools. Several young children initially followed them at a curious distance, but White Buffalo Woman sent them away with gentle instructions that Naya guessed related to respecting the serious nature of their work. "The children usually accompany me," the elder explained as they walked beyond the camp's edge. "They learn plant recognition from their earliest years. But today's teaching is different, healer to healer rather than elder to child." As they moved through the valley's varied landscapes, from open meadows to streamside thickets, from sunny slopes to shaded forest edges, White Buffalo Woman introduced Naya to the local plant communities with formal respect. At each new area, she would stop, offer a pinch of tobacco as gratitude, and speak brief words in Lakota that Naya recognized as prayers of acknowledgement. Despite the language difference, Naya found she could understand much of what White Buffalo Woman communicated. About each plant's properties, the fundamental healing energy sang to her in ways that transcended words: the cooling nature of certain leaves for fever, the warming properties of particular roots for circulation, the spiritual protective qualities of plants that grew in boundary zones between ecosystems. "You hear them clearly," White Buffalo Woman observed with approval after watching Naya correctly identify the uses of a particular root without being told. "Some take years to develop such direct communication with the plant nations. My mother said this gift often comes at great cost," Naya replied quietly. "That those who hear the plants most clearly have usually experienced profound loss that opens channels others cannot access." The elder nodded solemnly. "Your mother spoke truth. Great gifts and great suffering often travel the same path into our lives." By midday, their baskets contained a rich harvest of late autumn medicines roots, barks, seed heads, and a few persistent leaves that had survived the early frosts. They paused beside a clear stream to rest and drink. The surrounding mountains reflected perfectly in the still water. "Many in our camp will seek your help now that the council has given approval," White Buffalo Woman said as they sat together on sun-warmed rocks. Some from curiosity about Cherokee ways, others from genuine need, and a few to test whether your medicine holds power. "And how should I respond to those who come to test rather than heal?" Naya asked, recognizing the cultural complexity of her position. A smile creased White Buffalo Woman's weathered face. "With exactly the same compassion and skill you offer to those with genuine need. The strongest response to doubt is simply to demonstrate truth without defensiveness." This wisdom, applicable far beyond healing work, struck Naya as profoundly important for navigating her role as a stranger among the Lakota, attempting to prove herself or responding with offense to skepticism would only reinforce divisions. Quiet competence would speak more powerfully than any words of self-defense. As they gathered their baskets to return to camp, a distant movement caught Naya's attention. Riders approaching from the direction of the hidden mountain passage. She pointed them out to White Buffalo Woman, whose keen eyes narrowed as she assessed the newcomers. Hunting party returning, the elder confirmed after a moment. But they move with urgency that suggests news rather than meat brings them back to camp. By the time they reached the central area, the returning hunters had already arrived, their expressions confirming White Buffalo Woman's assessment. A crowd had gathered around them as they reported to Gray Wolf and the other council members. Lakota stood among them, his face grave as he listened. Seeing Naya and White Buffalo Woman approach, he broke away from the group to meet them. Soldiers have established a new fort at the valley's eastern approach, he explained without preamble. A full company with cannon and supply wagons, building permanent structures rather than temporary camp. The implications of this development hung heavy in the air between them. The valley that had sheltered the Lakota through countless winters was now directly threatened by military presence at its primary entrance. Does this relate to those who pursued us? Naya asked, remembering the mixed group of traders and army. Scouts who had chased them through the mountain passage. Perhaps, Lakota acknowledged. But this force is far larger, a planned occupation rather than a pursuit party. The hunters observed at least 50 soldiers with more arriving. White Buffalo Woman's expression remained calm despite the ominous news. Winter approaches quickly. Even the white soldiers cannot build effectively once heavy snow begins. They bring pre-constructed buildings, Lakota countered. Cut lumber, windows, stoves all transported in wagons. Their methods allow them to establish positions in days rather than months. This revelation of rapidly advancing technology and logistics sobered all three of them. The advantage of harsh winter conditions, which had historically provided native peoples respite from military pressure, was being systematically eliminated through industrial capacity and planning. The council meets now to discuss what this means for our winter camp, Lakota continued. Some argue for immediate relocation deeper into the mountains. Others believe such retreat only delays the inevitable confrontation. And what do you believe? Naya asked, noting the conflict evident in his expression. Lakota considered his response carefully. I believe we must understand their purpose before deciding our response. If they seek passage through the valley, negotiations might be possible. If they intend permanent occupation of our sacred wintering grounds. He left the alternative unspoken, but his meaning was clear. Conflict would become unavoidable. White Buffalo Woman's voice carried unexpected strength as she responded. Before the council decides, they should hear what was revealed to me in last night's dreams. The path ahead contains both shadow and light in patterns too complex for simple solutions. Lakota nodded respectfully. I will ensure you are called to speak. He turned to Naya, his dark eyes meeting hers directly. The soldier's arrival may relate to your presence among us. If Thornton has connections to the military commanders, he may have presented your situation in ways that serve his interests. As stolen property rather than a person making her own choices, Naya concluded, the bitter irony not lost on her. Her attempt to escape being treated as property might now be used as justification for military action against the people who had offered her shelter and respect. As they approached the council gathering, Naya felt the weight of her position with new intensity. The choices made in coming days would affect not just her future, but potentially the survival of the entire winter camp. The journey that had begun at a frontier trading post had now entangled her in larger forces that crossed boundaries between cultures, involved military strategy, and challenged fundamental questions about freedom, sovereignty, and human dignity. White Buffalo Woman seemed to sense her thoughts. The elder healer's gnarled hand clasped Naya's briefly as they walked. Remember always, she said softly, that even the smallest seed contains within it the potential to split the largest boulder. Given time and the right placement, What seems like weakness often carries unexpected power. This metaphor, drawn from the plant knowledge they both revered, offered a framework for understanding how a single Cherokee healer might somehow influence events that appeared far beyond her control. As they joined the gathering council, Naya carried this teaching in her heart, a reminder that transformation often begins in the most unlikely places, with the most underestimated forces. The mountain wind shifted direction, carrying with it the scent of wood smoke from the distant fort construction, a tangible reminder that two worlds were now converging on this valley, each with its own understanding of ownership, power, and relationship to the land. How this convergence would unfold remained uncertain, but Naya's role in the coming events had been irrevocably established by forces that had begun with her father's desperate decision and Dakota's life-changing intervention. The council fire burned low as White Buffalo Woman finished sharing her prophetic dream. Her words, translated by Dakota, had fallen upon the circle of leaders like stones into still water, creating ripples of concern, hope, and deep contemplation. For nearly an hour, she had spoken of visions that came to her during the previous night's sleep, images of soldiers and snow, of healing and conflict, of paths closing and unexpected doorways opening. The dreaming tells us that what approaches is not what it appears to be, she concluded, her voice carrying the authority of 8 decades of spiritual wisdom. The soldiers bring threat, yes, but also opportunity if we have eyes to perceive it. The Cherokee healer's arrival is no accident of fate, but part of a pattern larger than any single tribe's concerns. Gray Wolf, his weathered face impassive, despite the gravity of their situation, turned to address the council after a respectful silence had honored White Buffalo Woman's vision. "We face 3 paths," he said, his deep voice carrying clearly despite his advanced years. "We can abandon our winter camp and move deeper into the mountains, preserving our freedom, but risking hardship as the snows come. We can stay and prepare for conflict with the soldiers, preserving our territory but risking many lives. Or we can attempt to understand their purpose first, seeking a path that protects both our people and our sacred relationships with these lands." The debate that followed revealed deep divisions among the Lakota leaders. Younger warriors, including Black Fox with a still healing face scar, argued passionately for immediate preparation for battle. Elders counseled caution, noting the devastating consequences previous conflicts with army forces had brought to other bands. Those responsible for families and children advocated for withdrawal to safer territories, accepting temporary displacement over risking annihilation. Throughout this discussion, Naya sat quietly beside White Buffalo Woman, observing the complex interplay of perspectives with the same careful attention she would give to diagnosing a difficult illness. Though she could not understand the Lakota words, the tones, gestures, and facial expressions communicated volumes about the values and priorities each speaker embodied. Finally, Gray Wolf raised his hand, bringing the spirited debate to a respectful halt. "Before deciding, we should hear from the one whose presence may be connected to these events." The Cherokee healer has not yet spoken. All eyes turned to Naya, creating a moment of profound expectation. Dakota moved closer to translate, her words nodding encouragement. Naya rose slowly, summoning the formal speaking manner her mother had taught her for tribal councils. "I stand before you as a guest, grateful for your protection and hospitality," she began, her voice clear and steady despite the weight of the moment. "If my presence brings danger to those who have shown me kindness, I must acknowledge this responsibility." As Dakota translated, she observed the council members' reactions, noting the respect her directness generated among these leaders, accustomed to evaluating both words and character. "I believe there may be a 4th path not yet considered," she continued. "One that neither retreats in fear nor advances in aggression, but instead transforms the nature of the encounter itself." This unexpected suggestion created a ripple of interest among the council. Gray Wolf leaned forward slightly, his keen eyes fixed on her face. "Speak of this fourth path," he instructed through Dakota's translation. "The soldiers establish their fort as winter approaches, a time when illness often strikes hardest in military camps," Naya explained. "If sickness comes to them, as it likely will in close quarters with limited supplies, they may face a greater enemy than any human opponent." Walking Bear, whose wounded shoulder was already showing improvement from Naya and White Buffalo Woman's treatment, nodded with dawning understanding. "You suggest offering healing to those who threaten us." "I suggest recognizing opportunity where others see only threat," Naya clarified. "If Cherokee and Lakota healing knowledge were offered when needed most, bridges might be built that weapons cannot destroy." The boldness of this proposal, using compassion rather than conflict as a strategic response, created a profound silence around the council fire. It challenged fundamental assumptions about how to engage with the military forces that had caused so much suffering to native peoples throughout the territories. Black Fox broke the silence with a skeptical question. "Why would we heal those who come to take our lands? Better they should suffer the consequences of their invasion." Naya met his challenging gaze directly. "Healing creates debt that even the most hardened heart must acknowledge. It establishes relationship where before there was only opposition. Most importantly, it demonstrates a power different from but equal to military force, the power to preserve life rather than take it." White Buffalo Woman's voice joined the discussion, her words carrying the weight of spiritual authority as Dakota translated them for Naya's benefit. "The young healer speaks wisdom beyond her years. Our greatest strength has always been understanding the sacred connections between all living beings. To abandon this teaching when facing our greatest challenges would be to lose ourselves, even if we kept our lands." Gray Wolf stroked his chin thoughtfully. "This approach requires patience and perfect timing. Too early, and the soldiers will see only manipulation rather than genuine offering. Too late, and suffering may harden hearts beyond reaching. The plants will tell us when the moment is right," White Buffalo Woman assured him. "They speak most clearly when their medicine is most needed." After further discussion, the council reached a compromise that incorporated elements of multiple strategies. The camp would remain in place, but preparations would be made for swift relocation if necessary. Hunting parties would increase their efforts to establish substantial food stores. Warriors would maintain vigilant observation of the fort's development without provocative actions. And most significantly, White Buffalo Woman and Naya would prepare medicine specifically suited to the illnesses most likely to afflict the soldiers during the coming winter. "We choose the path of strength expressed through wisdom rather than merely through force," Gray Wolf concluded. "May the ancestors guide our steps along this unfamiliar trail." As the council dispersed, Dakota accompanied Naya back toward White Buffalo Woman's lodge, the night air crisp with approaching winter. Stars blazed overhead in patterns that seemed to echo the council's deliberations, points of light, maintaining their distinct identities while simultaneously forming part of greater constellations. "Your words changed minds that I thought unchangeable," Dakota observed, genuine admiration in his voice. "Black Fox has hated the soldiers since they killed his father and brothers 3 summers ago. Yet even he found wisdom in your suggestion. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from stepping outside the expected patterns," Naya replied. "My father taught me that before grief changed him. He said that when two forces oppose each other directly, both suffer damage, but when one force chooses an unexpected direction, new possibilities emerge." They paused at the edge of the central camp area, the surrounding lodges silhouetted against the star-filled sky. The normal evening activities had resumed, families sharing meals, children playing quieter games before sleep, elders telling stories that preserved tribal history and wisdom. Despite the threat looming beyond the valley's edge, life continued its essential rhythms. "What you propose to the council carries great personal risk," Dakota said quietly. If you approach the fort, you may face those who still consider you property to be claimed rather than a healer offering assistance. Naya had considered this reality carefully before speaking to the council. Some journeys require walking directly toward what we fear most, she said simply. My mother taught that healing often begins by touching the most painful place rather than avoiding it. Dakota studied her face in the starlight, his expression revealing new depths of respect. You possess courage that many warriors would envy, not the flashy bravery of battle excitement, but the deeper strength that faces difficulty with clear eyes and steady heart. This unexpected praise from a man whose own courage had been proven in countless dangerous situations touched Naya deeply. In the brief time since leaving Broken Ridge, their relationship had evolved from rescuer and rescued to something approaching genuine partnership, two people from different nations finding common purpose in increasingly challenging circumstances. We should begin preparations tomorrow, Naya said, returning to practical concerns. White Buffalo Woman and I will need to gather specific plants before snow covers the higher meadows. Dakota nodded. I'll arrange for warriors to accompany you for protection. The soldiers have begun sending scouting parties beyond the fort's immediate area. As they parted ways for the night, Naya felt a curious mixture of emotions: concern about the developing situation with the fort, excitement about deepening her healing knowledge through work with White Buffalo Woman, and a growing sense of belonging that she had not expected to find among the Lakota. The Cherokee girl who had been sold for a horse and some silver coins was discovering her true value in a place far from home, among people who recognized her gifts rather than seeing only her utility. The journey that had begun in shame and betrayal was transforming into something neither she nor anyone else could have predicted. Over the next 2 weeks, a rhythm established itself in the Lakota winter camp. Warriors maintained constant observation of the fort's development, reporting daily on the soldiers' activities. Hunting parties brought in substantial game deer, elk, and even 2 buffalo from a small herd discovered in a protected valley to the north. Women processed the meat, hides, and bones with practiced efficiency, preparing for the months when heavy snow would make hunting more difficult. Throughout this time, Naya worked closely with White Buffalo Woman, dividing their days between treating patients in the camp and gathering medicinal plants from increasingly distant locations as early snows covered the nearest slopes. Shared work created a bridge between Cherokee and Lakota healing traditions, revealing both differences in specific practices and profound similarities in underlying principles. Your people use more singing in your medicine ways, White Buffalo Woman observed as they prepared a complex mixture for treating winter coughs. The plants respond well to this. I can feel them awakening more quickly when you add your voice to the preparation. Naya had noticed complementary strengths in the elders' approach. Your understanding of how medicines work together is deeper than what my mother taught me. You combine plants and patterns that enhance each other's power rather than simply adding their separate properties. This mutual learning created medicines of extraordinary potency, healing preparations that drew from 2 distinct traditions while creating something new that belonged to neither culture exclusively. Patients within the camp noticed the difference, with recovery time shortening and chronic conditions showing improvement that previous treatments had not achieved. Word of their success spread throughout the 47 lodges, bringing a steady stream of people seeking help for ailments both minor and serious. Each healing interaction strengthened Naya's position within the community, transforming her from outsider to valued contributor in ways that formal council approval alone could never have accomplished. Most significant was her work with the children of the camp. Unlike some adults who maintained cautious distance from the Cherokee stranger, the youngest Lakota approached her with natural curiosity and openness. Naya began teaching them to identify medicinal plants through games and stories, continuing the educational traditions White Buffalo woman had established while adding elements from her own Cherokee upbringing. Children who learn the plant nation's gifts become adults who remember their responsibilities to all living things. White Buffalo Woman approved, watching Naya work with a group of young ones, eager to show her their findings from around the camp's perimeter. You have a gift for awakening their natural connection to the earth. This observation touched on something Naya had discovered about herself through these interactions. Despite her youth, she possessed a natural ability to transmit knowledge in ways that engaged rather than simply instructed, teaching gift that complemented her healing abilities. One crisp morning, as the first substantial snowfall blanketed the valley, Lakota sought out Naya with news that would accelerate their carefully developed plans. Smoke signals from our observers report coughing sickness has appeared in the fort, he announced without preamble. Several soldiers have been confined to the infirmary, and others show early symptoms. White Buffalo Woman, who had been sorting dried roots nearby, looked up sharply, sooner than expected. The cold came early this year. The fort was built hastily, with green wood that holds dampness, Lakota explained. Their stoves fill the barracks with smoke, and their water comes from a source downstream, from their own waste. They create the conditions for illness through ignorance of this land's ways. Naya and White Buffalo Woman exchanged knowing glances. They had anticipated such developments and prepared accordingly, but the timing created both opportunity and challenge. The medicines are ready, Naya confirmed. But how do we offer help to those who see us as enemies? Their medical officer visited a nearby trading post 3 days ago, Lakota replied. He sought remedies for coughs and fever, but found little available. The trader mentioned White Buffalo Woman's reputation as a healer, thinking to do the soldiers a service. This unexpected development, a trader voluntarily connecting the fort's needs with Lakota healing knowledge, suggested that relationships along the frontier remained more complex than simple opposition. Even in times of increasing tension, networks of pragmatic cooperation persisted. Then we have our opening, White Buffalo Woman said decisively. But not as supplicants bearing gifts, as healers offering fair exchange of value. Gray Wolf, informed of the situation, called a smaller council that afternoon to discuss how best to approach the fort. Unlike the full tribal council, this gathering included only those directly involved in the proposed healing mission, the Winter Chief himself, Lakota as military advisor, White Buffalo Woman and Naya as healers, and Walking Bear, whose recovery from his bullet wound provided living testimony to the effectiveness of their combined medical knowledge. We must appear neither threatening nor submissive, Gray Wolf emphasized. A small party, enough to demonstrate serious purpose but not enough to suggest attack. After careful deliberation, they decided that Lakota would lead a group of 5 himself. Naya, White Buffalo Woman, Walking Bear, and a young warrior named Little Hawk who spoke some English learned during a brief, unhappy period at a missionary school before escaping back to his people. We approach openly, under light of full day, Gray Wolf instructed, carrying the medicine bundles prominently to show your purpose. If they fire upon you or show other aggression, withdraw immediately without retaliation. This is an offering, not a battle. The gravity of their mission hung heavy in the air as final preparations were made. Everyone understood that far more than immediate healing was at stake. This initial contact could establish patterns of relationship that might ultimately determine whether peaceful coexistence was possible in the contested territories. The morning chosen for their approach dawned clear and cold. The snow-covered landscape transformed into a dazzling expanse of white that reflected the early sunlight with almost painful brightness. Naya helped White Buffalo Woman secure the precious medicine bundles, each wrapped in decorated hide containers that signified their sacred contents, according to Lakota tradition. As they prepared to depart, children from throughout the camp gathered to watch, their eyes wide with mixture of excitement and concern. One small girl, no more than 5 winters old, broke away from the group and ran to Naya, pressing a tiny, carefully woven bracelet of colored threads into her hand. For protection, Lakota translated the child's whispered words. She made it herself while saying the ancient prayers her grandmother taught her. Deeply touched by this gift, Naya knelt to the child's level, securing the simple bracelet around her wrist with ceremonial respect. "Tell her I will carry her good medicine with me," she responded, "and that it makes my heart strong to know the children's prayers go with us." This small interaction, witnessed by many in the gathering crowd, crystallized the significance of their mission. They carried not just physical medicines, but the hopes and vulnerability of an entire community, people who had experienced generations of broken promises and betrayals, yet still found the courage to extend healing rather than hatred toward those who threatened their way of life. As they mounted their horses and prepared to depart, Grey Wolf approached Naya directly. Through Lakota's translation, he offered words that would remain with her throughout the challenging day ahead. "You came to us as a stranger sold like property," the elder chief said, his weathered face solemn. "You go from us now as a valued member of our winter camp, carrying our respect and hopes. Whatever happens at the fort today, you have helped us remember that strength shows itself in many forms, beyond the warrior's bow or the hunter's spear." The small party rode out from the Lakota camp in formation that Lakota had carefully designed himself. In front as leader and protector, White Buffalo Woman and Naya side by side in the middle, carrying the visible medicine bundles. Walking Bear and Little Hawk bringing up the rear. Their approach was deliberately unhurried, following the most open path through the valley to ensure they could be seen from a considerable distance. As they drew nearer to the fort, details became visible that hadn't been apparent from the Lakota observers' distant positions. The hasty construction Lakota had mentioned was evident in walls that already showed gaps where green wood had warped in the freezing temperatures. Smoke rose from multiple chimneys, but its quality suggested poor ventilation and inadequate drafting. Most telling was the activity level, far less movement than would be expected from a full company, indicating that illness had indeed taken significant toll on the soldiers' effectiveness. When they reached a position approximately 300 yards from the fort's main gate, Lakota raised his hand, bringing their small party to a halt. At this distance, they could see sentries on the walls watching them intently, and several figures had emerged from buildings to observe their approach. "We wait here," Lakota instructed. "Let them come to us if they wish to speak. We have demonstrated peaceful intent by our open approach." For several long minutes, activity within the fort suggested debate about how to respond to their presence. Finally, a small group emerged from the gate's 4 soldiers accompanying a middle-aged man whose uniform identified him as an officer of some rank, likely the fort's commander. As this delegation approached, Naya studied their appearance with a healer's observant eye. The soldiers moved with the tension of men expecting trouble, hands never far from their weapons. The officer, however, carried himself with the weary dignity of someone facing multiple problems with insufficient resources. Most significantly, one of the soldiers coughed repeatedly as they approached, confirming the reports of illness within the fort. When the two groups were perhaps 30 paces apart, the officer raised his hand in the universal signal to halt. He studied them with careful assessment before speaking. "I am Major Robert Collins, commanding officer of Fort Resistance," he announced in a voice accustomed to authority. "State your business with this military installation." Little Hawk translated his words for White Buffalo Woman and the others, while Lakota responded in careful but limited English. "We bring medicine," he said simply, gesturing toward the decorated bundles carried by the 2 women. "For coughing sickness in your fort." Major Collins's expression revealed surprise quickly masked by professional composure. He had clearly not expected this purpose for their visit. "How do you know of illness among my men?" he demanded, suspicion evident in his tone. Smoke from many fires, few men working. Coughing we can hear even from distance, Lakota replied with straightforward logic. Winter comes early this year. Sickness always follows cold in badly built shelters. This blunt assessment of the fort's construction caused one of the soldiers to stifle a laugh quickly converted to a cough, suggesting that the Lakota warriors' observations aligned with the enlisted men's own opinions. The major studied them with greater attention, his gaze lingering on Naya with obvious puzzlement. "You're not Lakota," he said directly to her. "Cherokee or Choctaw by your appearance." "Cherokee," Naya confirmed, speaking English for the first time. "I work with the Lakota healer to bring medicines your men need." This unexpected development, a Cherokee woman speaking clear English while working with a Lakota healing party, clearly disrupted the major's assumptions about the situation. Before he could respond, the soldier who had been coughing suffered a more severe bout, bending slightly with its force. White Buffalo woman, observing this through a healer's experienced eyes, reached unhurriedly into one of her medicine bundles and extracted a small packet wrapped in birch bark. Without waiting for permission or translation, she approached the suffering soldier directly, her manner combining authority and compassion in a way that transcended language barriers. The soldiers tensed at her approach, hands moving toward weapons, but Major Collins raised his hand to stop any potential interference. With the pragmatism of a commander responsible for men's lives, he recognized that her intentions appeared genuinely helpful rather than threatening. White Buffalo woman handed the small packet to the soldier, pantomiming instructions to chew its contents. When he hesitated, looking toward his commanding officer for guidance, the major gave a slight nod of permission. The soldier unwrapped the packet, revealing dried leaves and what appeared to be small pieces of root. Following White Buffalo woman's gestures, he placed the mixture in his mouth and began to chew, his expression reflecting surprise at the strong but not unpleasant taste. Within moments, his coughing subsided noticeably, and his breathing became less labored. The effect was immediate enough that even the most skeptical observer could not dismiss it as coincidence or imagination. "What is that substance?" Major Collins demanded, his tone now reflecting professional interest rather than suspicion. Naya answered, recognizing the importance of establishing her role as bridge between the two groups. "A combination of plants that opens breathing passages and reduces inflammation in the lungs. We have prepared larger quantities for those more seriously ill within your fort." The major's military experience had clearly taught him to recognize valuable resources regardless of their source. "And what do you want in exchange for these medicines?" he asked directly, cutting to what he assumed was the underlying purpose of their visit. "Respect for Lakota winter hunting grounds," Lakota replied with equal directness. "No interference with our camp in the valley. Fair treatment when our people must travel near your fort." The simplicity and reasonableness of these requests, compared to what the major had likely anticipated, created a moment of possibility that might not have existed under different circumstances. No demands for the fort's abandonment, no references to broader territorial disputes, just practical coexistence during the challenging winter months ahead. "I have limited authority regarding territorial questions," Major Collins said carefully. "Those matters are determined at higher levels of command. But I can ensure that your winter camp remains undisturbed and that your people receive fair treatment when near this fort, so long as peaceful interactions are maintained on both sides." This limited but significant commitment focusing on immediate practical arrangements rather than attempting to resolve larger conflicts, created a foundation upon which further understanding might be built. White Buffalo woman spoke then, her words translated by Little Hawk. "Sickness does not care what language a person speaks or what color their skin shows. The plants offer their medicine to all who need it, asking only that we remember our place within creation's circle rather than imagining ourselves above it." As Little Hawk finished translating, something subtle shifted in the interaction between the two groups. The spiritual wisdom in White Buffalo Woman's words, combined with the practical demonstration of their medicine's effectiveness, had transformed what began as a tense encounter between historical enemies into something more complex and potentially constructive. Major Collins straightened his posture slightly, making a visible decision. "I invite your healing party to enter the fort and treat our sick men. You will be under my personal protection while within our walls and free to depart when your work is complete." As Dakota translated this invitation, Naya and White Buffalo Woman exchanged glances that acknowledged both the opportunity and risk it presented. Entering the fort would make them temporarily vulnerable, but it would also allow them to treat those most seriously ill and establish relationships that might prove crucial in the challenging months ahead. "We accept," Naya replied after receiving White Buffalo Woman's nod of agreement. "But we must return to our camp by nightfall. Our people would be concerned by longer absence." This practical limitation presented as consideration for their own community rather than distrust of the soldiers' preserved dignity on both sides, while establishing clear boundaries for their interaction. As the unusual procession moved toward the fort's entrance, Lakota healers and their Cherokee colleague accompanied by United States Army soldiers, Naya reflected on the extraordinary circumstances that had brought her to this moment. From being sold as property of negligible value, she had become a crucial link between peoples whose conflicts stretched back generations. The journey that began in humiliation now placed her at the center of an encounter that might, in some small way, begin healing wounds far older and deeper than those they had come to treat. The simple bracelet given by the Lakota child seemed to warm against her wrist, a tangible reminder that they carried not just medicine for coughing soldiers, but hopes for a future where different peoples might find ways to recognize each other's humanity despite the forces driving them apart. As they passed through the fort's gates, White Buffalo Woman spoke softly, her words meant only for Naya's ears and translated quietly by Dakota. "Remember always the smallest seed contains within it the power to split the largest boulder, given time and proper placement. Today, we plant seeds whose growth may continue long after we have returned to the earth." With these words of wisdom strengthening her spirit, Naya prepared to face whatever challenges awaited within the fort's walls, confident that the healing work ahead involved far more than simply treating physical symptoms of illness. True healing required courage to step beyond expected boundaries, wisdom to recognize opportunity within challenge, and faith that small actions performed with pure intention could ultimately transform even the most entrenched patterns of conflict. The Cherokee girl who had been sold to a cruel merchant had found her true value not in someone else's assessment of her worth, but in her willingness to use her gifts in service to a vision larger than herself, a world where differences might someday be recognized as strengths rather than threats, and where ancient wisdom could work alongside new realities to create possibilities previous generations could barely imagine. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.